The story of the Lopez family begins in Guadalajara, Jalisco, Mexico. The second largest city in Mexico, Guadalajara is the nest from which a poor boy and a tourist girl flew towards Los Angeles, met, and formed a close family in this far-flung city. Pedro Barrera sets the story in motion by deciding to leave his family and get on a bus towards Los Estados Unidos de America. The Bracero program, which was an agreement between the United States and Mexico, legally allowed workers entrance into the country. Over the program's history, over 500,000 Mexicans travel freely between the southwest border states of the United States and Mexico. His son Jorge soon followed in 1966 with the promise of a steady job and a more substantial income. However, Operation Wetback rounded up Mexican-looking workers and deported them back to Mexico. Pedro Barrera was caught up in an operation and grew to resent some aspects of the United States, but not enough to stay away. He returned to the U.S. shortly. Meanwhile, back in Mexico, my mother and father celebrated their 5th and 1st birthdays. Mariano Lopez, the youngest son of 15 siblings, 10 of which survived childhood, decided to come to the United States in 1974 at the ripe age of 21. His plan was to stay in the States for 6 months to save money. He eventually came to save the money, in fits and starts, but decided to stay. Eulalia Lopez, also the youngest of a large family of 8 siblings, visited her brother Jorge in Los Angeles in 1975. She went back and forth from Mexico to Los Angeles a few times as a tourist, visiting, sending postcards, collecting knickknacks, until she decided to stay on an expired visa. She quit school and worked at a clothing fabrica in East Los Angeles, where she met a man named Mariano. A year after that, in 1976, during the presidential campaign, they were both unaffected, but listened to news reports about Carter's speeches and the excitement that he caused among Latinos. Carter supported funding for the needy, which was code for the immigrants and poor Latinos my parents found themselves to be. My parents were married in 1978, the same year as the campaign for Proposition 13 heated up in California.
Here in California, in the primary tomorrow, people have the rare and no doubt pleasing opportunity to vote their taxes down, to tell the politicians that they will pay this much and no more. Proposition 13 it's called, and it's an absolute flat ban on how much property tax they can charge homeowners.
In 1979, they had their first child, David, your narrator, at St. Martha Hospital in East Los Angeles. Their son had an ailment and needed surgery. He was given the last rites by a priest, and the hospital offered help just for the surgery that would help save their son's life. In 1981, they had a second child, William, who was born without incident. In 1984, the Olympics came to the United States again, to Los Angeles.
There is the green light.
The distance she gets on this particular vault is about 22 feet.
She has 2 vaults, remember. Oh, boy.
The pride of being in this country as a citizen of the world swelled up in the Lopez family. I remember watching the Olympic flame being carried to the sunny streets of Los Angeles and feeling to be part of the world. In 1986, there was something called Hands Across America. We witnessed a fundraising event that broke down barriers across race, place, and class. And from the East Coast to the West Coast, Americans of different colors, shades, nationalities, beliefs, and creeds held hands, although there were a few gaps in the western states. Also in that year, in 1986, Ronald Reagan granted an amnesty for people in the United States living since 1981.
I believe in the idea of amnesty for those who have put down roots and who have lived here, even though some time back they may have entered illegally.
The law was designed to tighten restrictions on illegals and those who hired them. But for my parents, it was a path to citizenship. They were granted a temporary visa and eventually gained permanent residency, where they studied laws, government, learned English, and made some friends. In September of 1990, Roseanne Barr, an up-and-coming stand-up comedian, sang the national anthem in a San Diego baseball park. And after the controversy, we had a family discussion on what was and was not appropriate to being an American.
Nature of that, but that hasn't been called for yet. However, this afternoon it was discussed at the hospital.
In 1992, when I was in middle school, the Los Angeles riots broke out. Our family was scared and stunned, and after school and work we gathered around the television sets and radios to listen to what was going on, unsure as to why. In 1994, Proposition 187, the controversial measure that would bar the state of California from educating or treating illegal aliens, came up for the voting. It was a painful time for our family. Not being able to vote yet, we could only watch as the debate swirled around us. In 1995, my parents were proudly sworn in as citizens of the United States of America. In 1996, they voted for President Bill Clinton's re-election. It was the first time my parents were able to participate in a direct election. 5 years later, in September of 2001, we witnessed as airliners slammed into the towers of the World Trade Center. We watched as Muslims were othered and became the criminals, became the others, became the victims of this terrorist act. And if only for an instant, all people, especially Latinos living in the United States, both legal and illegal, were all, for an instant, Americans.